Waterfalls, waterfalls, waterfalls. Where I live in Fiordland, there are hundreds of thousands of waterfalls, most of which are waiting to be explored and photographed. And that's one of the things I love doing in my free time, just getting out there, following streams and rivers and seeing what I find. So in this video, I want you to join me out in the field. We're going to take the boat many kilometers out into the wilderness and follow some streams. I'm going to run through some tips and you'll see how I shoot out in the field and how I kind of work the scene. But then pay attention, because at the end, I'm going to show you some processing tips and we're really going to delve into the compositional thought process for capturing these types of scenes. So as I cruise along in the boat, the main thing I'm looking for is streams and creeks flowing into the lake. Then from there, the process of investigation begins. Is there a waterfall up there? Maybe there's interesting cascades and trees and ferns. All of the above. Who knows? The only way to find out is to get out and check. This is what I love doing in photography since day one, that exploration. It makes me excited. Most of the time you don't find something, but every now and then you do. And those go on to make great memories and every so often a nice photograph. So I've quickly parked the boat up and I do a very quick check. I don't go grabbing all the gear and everything until I've just had a quick check, and then I'll decide if I'm going to commit. What I'm looking for is obviously some kind of waterfall or nice flowing cascades that aren't obstructed. That's one of the problems. You can see there's a fallen tree. That's an obstruction, but thankfully, if you look in the distance, there's some nice cascades and they're quite free of any obstruction. So there's certainly potential at this location. So now it's time to actually get the camera. I'm just going to throw on the 10mm prime and put some boots on. These are my wader boots. I can't be bothered putting the waders on today, but these boots are good. They can get wet and they dry out pretty quick. So we'll throw those on and properly tie off the boat. It's one thing I always do in the lake. Things can change very quickly out here. And these are remote areas. We are 10, 20, 30 kilometers from civilization out here. We're in the wilderness. So if something goes wrong or the boat, drifts away, we're screwed. So tying off the boat properly. And now we have some multiple tiers, cascades in the foreground, and then a twin tier fall in the back. What's really interesting to me is that little log in the midground there, the foreground. And I'm wondering, can I utilize that in the image to, create a sense of movement and depth? I'm moving around really close here because of the 10mm lens. I can get right up close, and I'm wondering, can I use that log in the frame as a bit of a natural framing to frame up the waterfall in the background? What I typically do in the field is take a lot of test shots. See how I'm holding the camera up? I'm looking at the live view screen and more or less trying to look through as if I'm a viewer looking at the photograph. So I get direct feedback from the camera. I really like to shoot, review. I'm not one to try get everything perfect and then push the shutter once and say, yes, I've got the shot. I'm happy to fire away and then get that direct feedback. So right there, push play, review, and then bang, instantly deleted that one because I could just tell something was off. The challenge here is leading the eye through to the background. That's often what I want to do in these waterfall scenes, is lead the eye progressively from foreground, midground, into the background. This little waterfall scene's hard because I've got that upper falls up there, but there's a few little trees blocking that upper fall. So it's kind of saying, all right, maybe the main subject isn't necessarily getting the eye to that top fall. Maybe it's more keeping the attention down on this mid fall. So I keep working this whole scene and just looking at different options. Do I want ferns in the foreground? How does it look up here? So I just keep walking around, working the entire environment. And I'm not just sitting on the one comp. It's something I stopped doing many years ago. Get a few frames and then try something else. Get a few more, try something else. Keep moving. It's not until I get home and look at the raw files, that's when I can really see which is the best frame. But I won't have that option if I'm not getting enough frames out in the field. So I keep moving around the environment. Now I've kind of finished with that scene. We're going to talk about those shots soon when we look at the raw files. I'll show you what I've processed from there. But I want to move on. What else can we find? The light is perfect for this type of photography because it's overcast. So we just have a soft, diffused light. So let's carry on. just as I started to get some speed, I spotted another creek. So I'm gonna pull up again. This one has a bit more volume on it. A little temporary fix there for the boat to hold it in place. Look at the volume coming out here. I love the cool air that flows out of these falls. It's amazing. Fresh, beautiful, clean water. Look at that scene. Lovely waterfall, definitely no obstructions. What was interesting with this waterfall is almost too simple. You know, the other scene was somewhat too chaotic with trees and branches left and right, whereas this one, look at that, very clean front-on shot. I love that S-curve in the water though, look at that. So pre-visualize a slow shutter. So I basically went for a really simple frame here and slowing the shutter down to 0.4 seconds, 1/3 of a second. I generally don't like shooting waterfalls too slow. So a big tip is experiment with different shutter speeds, and often I find slightly faster is better. 1/5, 1/4, 1/3, slowest, half a second. Anything longer than that, I feel like I lose way too much water texture. So I captured a few frames there and really just worked on a nice, simple S-curve frame. And then on the way out, I decided, let's go a little bit further back and utilize these cascades going over the rock. Always looking for cascades. That's where you get the really nice textures and a sense of movement. Cascades in the front there, waterfall in the back. Let's have a look at some of the frames that were shot out there, and I want to talk about settings, composition, and some of that theory behind working with waterfalls. So we're going to pull up here now in Adobe Camera Raw, some frames. These are two that I've probably processed 90%, so let's not fully judge these. They're not 100% finished. We'll talk about them in a minute. Let's just look at these other frames now, and I'll talk about what I didn't like about them and then why I probably would use this one compared to the other two. One of the things I'm often trying to do with waterfall photography is create a sense of flow and movement, not just waterfalls, just all my photography in general. I want people to be able to progressively move through the frame. The challenge with waterfalls often is if we can't achieve that and we're stuck having the waterfall dead front on. And that's kind of what happened with this composition here, where there's a slight sense of movement, but see how the movement is basically just running us out of the frame. You know, we're starting on the top right and then we just bounce all the way through. When we go into this one, now it's just too front on. There's hardly any sense of movement. And the background is quite obstructed by that log. It's a little bit frustrating on the eye to not be able to see that final waterfall. I found this frame probably had the best of both worlds, where I've got the movement, but it's not completely leading me out of the frame, because this lower section here, see how the cascade is just very fine strands, whereas this first one, way too much white. So avoid too much white in your frame, even in seascape photography. That just becomes distracting, and that's what's making the eye get forced down and out of the frame. Everything's flowing down there, the most brightest portions down there. It's just imbalanced. Whereas this comp I felt like had the better balance, and if anything, and hopefully the main focal resting point is in this centralized area. In order to help achieve that, we've got these rocks on the right, balanced out by the rock on the left. And then the cascades here, not too demanding on the eye. And by the time we get here now, hopefully it just becomes more of a natural resting place. A couple of challenges. It's a shame that that background waterfall is so obstructed, just that top section. I worked really hard to maybe not have it obstructed, but just couldn't get there with the comp. So this is the best I could really come up with. Really work that scene from all angles, and it's very, very challenging. There's just a lot going on with the top fall, this middle fall, but then you've got the little log there. One other downside here is just a lack of plant life on these rocks. So someone like me, been doing this for 15 plus years in these environments, you get a bit selective over time. Nothing wrong with that. As the years roll on, you just, you've shot so much, you start to raise the bar high for yourself. So it is a shame that, in the front here, we just couldn't get a few nice greens, a few plants and fronds or something like that. So undecided if I'll be keeping that one or not, but hopefully compositionally, it just gives you an idea of that visual flow. Let's get the eye moving through, but think about where is the eye going to naturally rest up. The strongest thing to consider is balance. That's kind of what we had in this frame as well. Big sense of balance, at least here in this one, the rocks are fully covered in green. So in this frame, a little bit barren. I don't mind the textures in the rock though, to be fair. But I like in this one that we've got greens, greens, greens. Still don't have the plants necessarily. It's mainly moss, but I really like all the green. The main part I liked here though was the wide to narrow progression that we're getting in the creek and that very subtle S-curve. So I feel like we're achieving that sense of flow that I mentioned earlier. And I love all these cascades running through the frame. And I slowed it right down to 0.8 of a second here to pick up those textures. That's getting quite slow for me. Typically I won't go that slow. It just really warranted it for this particular spot. Whereas this previous frame, it's 1/3 of a second. So that's that faster shutter speed, which I typically like. That's often when you're really close as well. You can afford to be faster. When you come further back, which is what I was here, you might find that you're slowing it down a little more. So two different frames. One thing I lean into with the processing on these forest scenes and waterfall scenes is the cool tones. Blues and greens, they just work so well together. And you'll see the raw files here, they just don't necessarily have the blues in them. So I don't mind introducing that a little. So one way I will typically do that is by either cooling the global temperature. So instead of being quite warm like this, we could just bring it into the blue. Another way to do that is in the color grading, going into the midtones and just introducing some blue into there. Got to be careful though that the water isn't coming out unnaturally blue, even though these can be because they're snow melt. It's just that fine line. So this is where that marination process comes in. Don't rush these edits, take your time. And that's the stage it's at for me now. These two frames I have processed. I'm going to let them sit in the draft folder for a while and then I'll decide, all right, what are the final adjustments, and just make those adjustments and then come back later with fresh eyes, maybe make more adjustments, so on and so forth. You've heard me mention it a million times in the videos, but don't rush the processing. Take your time, you'll get a better result. And you might even decide, hey, I'm not going to keep this photo anyway because it's not meeting that certain standard that you have for yourself, and everyone's going to be different there. But I really enjoyed the moments here. I think I'll be keeping this frame for sure. Undecided on that one, but man, I know I gave it my best. It's a tricky little frame to shoot. Hopefully that makes sense when it comes to composing these types of scenes. It's not just for waterfalls, it's for a lot of landscape photography in general. Try to lead the eye progressively from front to back, create a sense of flow and movement as much as possible, and you'll get a way more dynamic image. And pay attention to the brightest areas. And if the brightest areas are down in the corners and the edges, it's probably going to throw the eye off the frame and just be a bit annoying. Try to get the brightest portion in the background where the main focal point is. That's why I'll often say in my teaching, lead the eye from dark to light. And on an overcast day like this, it's quite easy because often the brightest area is just up in that canopy, or you can just introduce some brightness with the processing by raising the exposure with an adjustment brush in the area where you want the eye to go. Anyway, thank you for checking out the video. Please leave any questions, any comments, thumbs up and shares go a long way, and I'll see you in another video soon.